Okay, I am going to share my screen and we will get things rolling. All righty. I am Ashton Brooks, the AIA Austin Women in Architecture Chair for 2024, and this is the College Salon Series. Tonight's topic is Goldilocks Syndrome, which is a wonderful way to say, hey, how do you find what is just right for you? Small firm, medium-sized firm, big firm. Panelists tonight are from a variety of different size firms, a variety of different backgrounds, and have some excellent information to share. I would note that you're at the very beginning of your careers. It's great to think about this now, but some of the questions that we'll cover could also be relevant later in your career too when you're thinking about making a switch. So, try to remember some of the good stuff and put a little post-it note in your brain for later down the road. We could not do what we do without our amazing sponsors, so I want to give a quick thanks to all of them. This year, they are Artesian Hardwood Floors, Bespoke Careers, Contour Collective, Gus Burnell Film, Photo, and Education, Cook McIntyre Construction, Live Oak Builders, McKinney York Architects, Michael Shue Office of Architecture, Miller Imaging and Digital Solutions, Neon Agave Homes, Page, Pilgrim Building Company, ProSource Wholesale, Rogers O'Brien Construction, Skelly Build, Texas Tiny Pools, and Word and Card Design Group. We love our sponsors so much. They help us do so many things. And some of our panelists this week are even from some of these companies. So if you know anybody at these groups, tell them thank you because they support women in Austin so greatly. And with that, I am going to introduce our moderator, Chin Yao. Chin has been practicing since 2010. Her background actually started in molecular biology. So that was a mouthful for me to say tonight, which I can only imagine what the studying for it was like. So kind of goes hand in hand there. Chin switched to architecture and has been mostly focusing on higher education and K-12 work within, not just within Austin. Her firm, Saam, is actually based out of Boston, and she works remotely from Austin, Texas. Chin, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Ashton, and welcome everybody. And we're really excited about this topic. I think everyone can relate to wanting to find a right fit for them out of school. And there's just so many options out there in terms of size. And so we're really excited about this topic. So I want to also thank our panelists tonight, and then I'll introduce each one and ask them to maybe elaborate on their background and their firm and their role in the firm. So I'll start with, I guess, because it's a Goldilocks, maybe we'll start small, medium, large, extra large. So we'll perhaps start with Andrea LaCour. Andrea is a co-founder of Contour Collective, an accessibility consulting firm based in Austin, but collaborates nationwide. Andrea is a certified accessibility specialist, ADA coordinator, and consulted over 1,000 projects for accessibility. Andrea is also on the board of directors for the ACE Mentor Program of Austin, and is an active member in AIA Austin and more. And recently, Andrea was awarded the 2024 Austin Under 40 Award for Architecture, Construction, Engineering, and Design. Congrats, Andrea. If you want to maybe elaborate more on your background and Contour.
Sure. So I have a bachelor's degree in architecture. I studied at the University of Washington in Seattle. And when I graduated, I actually taught third grade instead of doing architecture work. So I've sort of been trying to find my right fit for a long time. I did work at a very small residential firm for about 3 years before jumping over into accessibility work. And I did start my own company with my business partner 9 years ago now. And so we are a very small company. We're only 8 people, but we consult for all kinds of firms, several other panelists. I do some work with you all as well. And so I really kind of have a unique lens in that I get to see a little bit of how different types of companies work. And that is kind of fun for me as well. Happy to be here. Also, happy to see, I believe, an ACE alum on the call today, which is awesome.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. Yes, I think your perspective is really unique, obviously collaborating with so many office types, and your background in transitioning from architecture to a more specialized niche in the industry is also a great perspective. So next, I'll introduce Sonia Ramirez with O'Connell Robertson. Sonia is a multidisciplinary designer who integrates qualities of architecture, interior design, and urban design through a holistic approach. She actually has a degree in environmental design and a focus in sustainability, which is great to incorporate elements of universal design, human factors, culture, and neurodiversity in her design process. She has a host of project typologies in corporate, healthcare, multifamily, and education. Sonia also is a technical lead in the office and a lead expert, obviously contributing to her sustainability focus and background. So welcome, Sonia. Would you like to maybe share a little bit more about your background and your office?
Yes, thank you, Chen Chen. Hello, everybody. As she said, I am Sonia Ramirez. And just to kind of give a brief backstory on myself, I, in a sense, really just enjoy the Goldilocks Syndrome in terms that I purposely like to look for different firms and move to different cities for fun. So I am originally from Oklahoma. I did graduate from OU, which is in itself a unique experience to be so close to UT in Austin. And so I started in Oklahoma, and I like to just pick a different city every 2 or 3 years. So most recently, I moved to Austin from Seattle. And so it's just been fun to experience different size firms and different project types. I've worked, I think, on almost every project type that I can think of, depending on the firm I've been at. And I'm a person who I kind of get not bored, but it's kind of, I don't like to keep a routine. So I like to explore new types and explore new things. And so with that, I focus on sustainability, really diving into interior design and urban design factors. I work on the architecture team, but I specialize in all 3 fields. So it's really fun to bring in elements of social economics and then bring in that sustainability factor into the different architecture project types. Right now at O'Connell Robertson, I focus on K through 12. So I'm currently designing 2 elementary schools.
Great, thank you. And if you don't mind me asking, what is the size of your firm, and I guess how many people at O'Connell Robertson?
Yeah, at my office here, we have 3 offices, Austin, San Antonio, and Houston. So overall, we're about a 200-person firm. But in my office, it's usually about 80 of us here. So you kind of get that both sense of a smaller firm and then it going into more of a medium-sized one.
Great. Thank you. So next, I'd like to introduce Selma Sanchez with Kirksey. Selma is an architectural designer with a multicultural background, born in Mexico and raised in Austin. And her background has really shaped her approach to design. She combines creativity and collaboration to address a range of design challenges. Selma is also the co-chair of AIA Austin Latinos in Architecture and is a very active member of NOMA, National Organization of Minority Architects. And she also volunteers with the ACE Mentor Program. Selma, would you like to also elaborate on your background and your work at Kirksey?
Yes, definitely. Thank you all for being here and for creating this space for all of us. And just to go into depth a little bit more on my background. So I've been in Austin the majority of my life after moving from Mexico, and I studied architecture at UTSA. And after graduation, I moved back to Austin and I started working. And now I'm at Kirksey, which is on the cusp, I think, to mid to large We're about 250 people spanning across Austin, Houston, and Dallas. And similarly to Sonia, I've jumped around a couple of times in my career. I'm about 5 years into my career, and I'm definitely very well versed in the experiences of going from a small to mid to now, I guess, large. So hope we can contribute to a lot of y'all's thoughts and for the future, because there's a lot of exciting stuff to learn.
Yes, your background and exploring different size offices, I think will really come into play in the conversation to make those comparisons. And then finally, we have Ellie Bennett from Page. Ellie is an Austin-based architectural designer. Her work is focused on multi-family high-rise, but she also has a experience in historic preservation, high-end residential, workplace, and K-12. Ellie also leads the high school student outreach program and the Page Austin Collegiate Summer Intern Program. So she's really given back already and mentoring a lot of students and help with their transition into the field. And Ellie has been recognized in Interior Design Magazine's 30 Under 30 class of Austin and currently in contention for the national recognition among 30 individuals. So congrats on that as well. Ellie, if you also would like to give further introduction to yourself.
Of course. Thank you. So I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts, and then I went to college at Ohio State University and graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Architecture. During my time at school, I interned for a really large architecture firm in Boston and then a very small architecture firm. I was the 5th employee, also in Boston. And then after graduation, I moved to Austin and have been working at Page in the multifamily sector ever since.
Great. And I think Page, not specific to the Austin office, but has maybe 20 offices nationally and globally. So I think that was probably the largest firm that we have represented here. So.
It's 20 offices. The Austin office is a little over 200 or 250 people. And then I think it's like 1,500 to 2,000 employees total.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for sharing your background. And I think we will just get started. Just wanted to let the students or guests know that if you do have a question anytime, feel free to just put it in the chat box. We will say Q&A to the end, but you don't want to forget your question, just feel free to pop it in the chat. So I guess we'll just start with maybe all of your experiences. Maybe when you were first job searching, was the size of the firm a factor in where you applied or your considerations? So I know maybe we could start with Selma, as you mentioned, having explored a lot of different offices. So
yes, so I definitely started off my career wanting to be exposed to a lot of different types of work and responsibilities. So I definitely worked at a smaller firm in which, I was doing a lot of designing, permit stuff, like things that I didn't think that I would be exposed to as early on. And yes, it was scary, but I survived and I was able to really hone in on what I like out of architecture, what I can contribute to the team, and what my fortes were. So I think after establishing kind of those rankings in my head, I decided to switch over to my current company where I'm at. And here I think I've gotten to really hone in on the things that I like to do and the types of projects that I wanted to do, because I think going from a small to a large firm, maybe the project types are different, the square footage, sometimes you get more high profile clients and stuff. So it kind of just varies on company to company, but I think the responsibilities kind of evened out, and instead of me being responsible for 10 types of things, maybe now I'm only responsible for 1 or 2, and it kind of helped to really establish where I fit in with the team and what I can bring to the table. So it was definitely a quick type of situational thinking where I was like, wait, why do I like architecture, and where can I improve? You know, it's always a conversation to be had. And so yeah, those are my experiences.
Great. Yeah, that's really interesting that did you feel like when you sort of started with a smaller firm that you got maybe a little bit more exposure than you have coming into a larger, or just curious about that dynamic?
Yeah, definitely. Like the exposure, I think, was pretty different. It was like a night and day type of difference. But I think being exposed to a lot of responsibilities, one, allowed me to believe in myself. Imposter syndrome is very real. So I was like, okay, well, maybe if they trust me enough to do X, Y, and Z, maybe I am capable of doing X, Y, Z. You know, so a lot of that just kind of helped boost my morale. I think, especially during a lot of this COVID times that we were all experiencing, like, where's the market going, and all of these other things that I was just really leading into the positive affirmations that you would get from clients and from your coworkers and all these other things that I think just boost the morale in the studio culture.
Maybe Andrea, since you also did a transition, maybe just if you had anything to add when you were first, job searching, was the size of firm important to you, and what other factors did you consider?
Sure. I never even thought about the size of the firm. I did graduate college in 2009, and the economy was really horrible and people weren't really hiring much. So I was sort of, I'll take whatever I can get attitude about it. And so I ended up at a small firm, and a lot of what Selma just said, I think, is very true. You sort of get thrown in the deep end, because if there's no one else there to do it, they're going to give it to you. And sometimes you have to kind of learn, which can be a positive thing, but it also, I think at times was really challenging for me as well. Like, I don't know how to do this. How am I supposed to figure it out on my own? But I would say that confidence is real. I don't know that I would have decided to go out and start my own firm if I didn't see a small firm kind of from the inside out. If I had only been at a large firm, I probably would have thought I can't do that because it felt so large and unattainable. That a small firm, it feels a little easier. I could do that, I could do this. So if you do have a little bit more of that entrepreneurial, tick in you, that you're curious about that, I do think a small firm is a great way to test out if that's for you.
Great, yeah, and you think you bring up a great point, meaning, it's great when you're first searching, like you maybe don't know if you want a small or a large. So obviously these conversations are great to expose people, but you mentioned maybe sometimes some people fall in where they don't really have a choice of, like, maybe what they had envisioned or what is out there. So that is a great point. I know, Ellie, I saw you nodding. I don't know if you would like to share your initial foray into the different companies you've been at.
Yeah, of course. So my first internship, as I said, was at a really large firm, and I was feeling exactly how Selma and Andrea were explaining. Just, it was a lot, and I realized I didn't know that much about architecture in general, and especially the profession. And it just was a little bit overwhelming, more overwhelming than I thought a first internship might be. So I gravitated towards a smaller firm for my second internship. And is exactly as they said, it gave me, a lot of responsibilities and a lot of confidence in what I can do. So that when I was applying for positions out of school, I kind of looked at, my personality and some of the things that I knew I wanted to do adjacent to architecture, and decided that a medium to large size firm was where I wanted to be. Because I didn't know exactly what studio or what kind of work I wanted to be doing, I gravitated towards a larger firm that did a lot of different kinds of work so that I could figure it out.
I guess shifting a little bit to smaller firms having maybe more opportunities, but kind of thrown in the deep end a little bit, and then larger, once you have that confidence, maybe more, is it accurate to say more project typologies or more available resources? So with that, I guess maybe Sonia, would you mind sharing a little bit, like maybe what a typical day looks like for you or somebody just out of school in a, I guess, mid to large size firm, kind of what kind of projects or resource that they would be exposed to starting out?
So I'll kind of start by saying that I didn't exactly look for specific qualities in the firm in terms of daily activities. As somebody who equally studied multiple disciplines, my priority was that we had engineering in-house or we had an urban designer in-house wherever the firm was. And so what I did there, honestly, it's professionals get really excited when you ask or when you look interested in their work. So I absolutely loved my first internship because it kind of came by accident. They just needed somebody for a summer project, which wasn't super exciting. It was through the interior design department, and it was to help plan for a bond in terms of evaluating the district's assets for a public school and then figuring out the replacement, which is a really fancy way of saying that I put a barcode on every single piece of furniture in 37 schools and put them into a digital system. And so, yeah, I actually learned so much about furniture and the education system, how to design for a 6-year-old so that a student is comfortable in a classroom as equally comfortable as a teacher is. And so you start to see all the different details that go into a design. And I actually was an intern for the interior design department, which was composed of 7 people who all specialized in a different project sector. So somebody specialized in historic preservation, another designer specialized in corporate, somebody else specialized in healthcare, and we had government work in-house too. And I just got to pick, every week I used to work for somebody different, and it was just asking the questions. And when I didn't have a lot of work, I could say, hey, can I go see what the urban designer is doing in-house today? Since that's also one of my fields of interest. And they were super excited about it. So just expressing your interest in different places, I think gets you a long way. And once you start getting exposed to those, I learned lighting calculations, which is typically for a lighting engineer or an electrical engineer, and being able to think that through as you're designing RCPs as an interior designer, as you're putting in, doing red lines for an architecture on the architecture side. It was really nice to be exposed to everything I could think of as an intern. And to this day, honestly, I don't think it's a bad thing that I don't want to specialize in one thing. A lot of people kind of say, hey, find what you're good at, find what you like, find what you enjoy. And I enjoy all of it. So for me, it's equally fun to work. I've worked for the interior design department. I currently work for architecture. I've worked for an urban designer, and I don't really get tired of cycling through them. So I think it's fun to be able to switch it up every once in a while and just keep learning.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned something interesting about maybe a larger firm, but also, like you said, maybe a firm that's not just architecture. So there are firms out there that are AEC, or engineering is in-house, or maybe could you speak a little bit more to that collaboration? You started saying having those, but is there more collaborative aspects to a firm that has multidisciplines that way?
Yeah. I think the main way to get started on that is that it is one of the negotiation points whenever you're looking for a job, saying that you want to work for different disciplines, or that, me specifically, I work for the Department of Architecture and for the Department of Interior Design. And so that gives me the flexibility to play a role in a project where I'm the designer and I help out whenever the architecture team needs it, compared to being technical lead on the architecture team and being in charge of all the consultants of submitting for permit. And so being able to switch back and forth between that responsibility, I think is already a different collaboration within myself. And so to that, you add, if you have an electrical engineer, if you have a plumbing engineer, which we typically do a lot for big projects, a cooking consultant, it's really easy to just say, hey, walk over to the desk and say, do you want to grab lunch and talk a bit more what you do? Or, as somebody on the architecture team, I want to understand how diffusers work or how negative and positive air works. And they love to talk about it too. So you kind of share that interest of, this is why I put that wall there. This is why the room is this size. And they can in turn say, this is how I calculated the elements that you need on the engineering side. And so it gives you this kind of whole picture of looking at a project. And then you just kind of start incorporating those thoughts subconsciously once you're designing the next time. So I think overall it helps the quality and the thought process of being able to do more things accurately the first time instead of having to redesign throughout the process.
I guess with that as well, Andrea, I think because you, consult and work with multiple firms of different sizes, do you want to speak a little bit more to that collaboration between and what you've noticed, I guess, working with different firms that way?
Sure. Yeah, I think it might get in the weeds a little bit, but I have found that a lot of times firms that have multiple disciplines, they don't always hire each discipline for the same job. So sometimes you might have in-house, an engineer and an architecture side, but that project has just the architectural component and they actually hire a different company as the engineer. Which is really interesting too, because you kind of have to like switch back and forth, and then you can still lean on folks that you might have in your office, but at some point they might say, hey, we're not getting paid for this, so you really got to go, over there, or ask the other engineer. And then I think too, with that, didn't really talk too much about design build, but that is, a big avenue more on the construction side where they may have in-house architecture and then they build it, or they may have, in-house architecture and then they hire a different builder for it. And a lot of times I do find as well that there's just a difference in liability on that. And so you find people get more strict in certain ways. So if they design it and they build it, they're usually more strict about making sure everything is done right because they're holding more liability for all the pieces of it, versus if, architecture firm and a contractor are different companies and something goes wrong, they kind of can try to point fingers at each other. And so that is, a little bit getting in the weeds, but it is something that you kind of have to deal with when you're working day to day. You have to work with both people in your own firm, but you also have to work with all of the other consultants on the team or the contractors.
Right. That's, I think, the way that we collaborate among not just sizes, but different typologies, working with different engineers and contractors and owners. I think all of that influences what you're doing on a day-to-day or project basis. So that's great. I'm going to shift a little bit. It seems like there's an advantage to larger firms with meeting different types of people. And we talked about gaining confidence from a smaller firm. Maybe Selma, would you want to dive in a little bit to the advantages of Kirksey large, I would say 200, but not in the thousands. So what kind of advantages for somebody entering the profession for a size of your firm?
So the unique thing about Kirksey here in Austin is that however we're like over 200 people in Austin, Houston, and Dallas, the Austin office is about 25 of us. So I still get that local small office feel while still having the backbone and all of the resources available from a big firm. So I would definitely say like an advantage is the mentorship opportunities that they have and the training and the resources. There's like a button for everything. There's quite literally like articles that are written on how to, set up a project base point when you're setting up a new project. It's like the craziest things you can imagine, like setting up a new family. It's everything that you've ever wondered on how to do, just so we become more efficient. And not that the studio culture isn't like, hey, you can ask any dumb question, but I think they've really honed in and streamlined the process of how we all start and end a project. So I think those learning opportunities and having direct access to people that are experts in different types of typologies is another thing that I didn't think I would be exposed to, but the office here in Austin is also multidisciplinary. So I've worked on, mid-rise, a school, higher education, commercial buildings. So I've done a little bit of everything in the office that I'm currently at, and still experiencing the pros and the cons of small and big firm feel.
Great. Yeah, that's really great that, like you said, you get both best of both worlds in a way, like a community is smaller, so you don't feel lost in the firm of 200, but then you get the resources from a larger firm. And with that, I don't know, Ellie, if you experienced similar with Paige, and is there collaboration among different offices, and how big does that resource get for a large firm?
Yeah, absolutely. So because Paige has so many different market sectors, we have a lot of, for example, I'm in the multifamily studio, but we have a multifamily studio in several of our offices. So a lot of the times our project teams will be made up of a few people from several offices. So not only, do I work pretty exclusively with like the 15 people in the multifamily office in Austin, I get to meet a bunch of the people nationwide. And then outside of the collaboration, I think having or being a part of a larger firm was really great for pursuing licensure. So Paige was able to provide resources like study materials, reimbursement. Specifically, we have an emerging professional study group where Paige compensates us for the time and provides lunch while we study for our exams and things like that. And I know now that that's something that's really important to me.
Yeah, that's great. And then I guess just curious on that firm, with a larger firm, I can see if for smaller firms, maybe when you're talking about studying, I remember studying as a group. So like maybe in smaller offices, it's possible that they're very small, maybe there's a wide range of experience levels, but at a large firm, maybe you could find a cohort that's similar to your experience level, more likely to happen that way, just with the number of people there. So I think
Absolutely.
yeah, that's great. And then so yeah, I think licensure is great. I think the large offices could provide, like you said, the study materials, and then maybe it's possible at a smaller firm, maybe only yourself, maybe one other person would be studying at the same time. So that's a great great advantage for a large firm. I guess, Sonia, do you have anything to add in terms of advantages for, again, maybe a mid-sized firm?
Yeah, for me, what has been really important is that, to be completely honest with you, I knew I was going into an unaccredited program because I do have a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Design. So it's not a streamlined process to get licensure. And so for me, it was really important for somebody to support certifications outside of licensure. So to get my Green Associates, to get my lead AP, to get well certified. And so just figuring out, hey, what types of resources do you have for somebody interested in something that's not your typical streamlined process? And so I have resources for the interior design licensure. I have resources for that architecture, but I, coming into my interview and coming to O'Connor Robertson, I said, hey, I would really like to work on a sustainability project. What types of opportunities are there, or can you create for me? And can I, instead of getting compensated for a past ARE exam, can I get compensated for the late AP exam? And so those are different questions to ask when you have a specific interest, and when you want to say, hey, I know I want to be able to work my own project later, but right now I really want to learn how to detail. And so being able to say, hey, we have a standardized process, or you can help us, redline that process. If you are really interested in programming and space planning like I am, we can put you on the beginning phase of certain projects, and you don't have to see them all the way through construction. And then, you know, me being me, I switched up and said, hey, I really want to see a project through its entire process. So I've gone through programming, I went through design, CDs, and now I'm seeing the project through construction administration, which for me is something that I wanted to be able to do as early on as I could as a designer, just to know what it's like to be in each phase, what type of work it requires, what the schedule looks like, because being in construction administration has nothing to do with your daily space planning. And so it's, for me, it's a good change being able to switch back and forth. And so once I'm done with this project in construction administration, I'll be able to start over with a new project. So just kind of that flexibility of not having a traditional career path for me has been super, super great to be able to work with a bigger firm.
Yeah, I think that's one of, I don't know if it's a conception that where maybe it seems that you have very opportunities to do various things on different types of projects. Sometimes I think one maybe challenge I heard on larger firms is maybe people get pigeonholed, or like you're a PM track, or you're a technical person, or you're this, and try to define you a little bit more. I don't know if that has been other people's experience, or maybe Andrea, from a smaller perspective, do you think what advantages are in the smaller firm to maybe explore different varieties, or any advantages in general for a smaller firm?
Yeah, I mean, I think all the sizes obviously have pros and cons, which this is really neat to kind of see all of them laid out. I do think in the larger firms, I don't necessarily know that it be pigeonholed into, you're doing this, but I have found that some people, they're really good at one thing, right? And so because it's a larger firm, it's easier to say that's your job now, versus in a smaller firm, if you're really good at one thing, you still probably have to do other things too, because they need to get done by somebody. And so I do think sometimes, in my experience at least, it's like the same person ends up, being the contact for these types of questions or these types of projects. And then also, I think a big difference in sizes, but really more structure of firms, is also about tracks towards ownership and partnerships. When you see the titles of people at different firms, they vary a lot, but sometimes it'll say partner or principal, and depending on the firm, you may have to buy into that. And sometimes buying into that ownership partnership is through years of service, and sometimes it's financial, and sometimes it's a compromise. And I do think the larger firms start to put people on those tracks earlier, even though it may take the same amount of time, which makes sense, because a large firm is going to need dozens of partners, right, to be able to financially make it work. Smaller firm may only need 2 or 3 partners. And so again, kind of thinking through from the longevity side, if you do have desires to run the company, right, to be at the top level, I think a larger firm may have easier avenues to get there, versus a smaller firm might be the 2 people who started it, and you may never have an opportunity to get in at the top level.
Right. Yeah, that's great to think, as people enter the professional practice for the first time, but, people do have aspirations to own a firm or run the firm, or like many, many years out. But I think it's great. It seems that both small and large give that opportunity, but in different ways, I think. So that's a really great point. I think, one of the things you touched upon were these advantages, and then a little bit of a challenge. But I don't know, Selma, have you experienced any different challenges that, I guess, a size of a firm of your size might encounter for somebody just entering the profession? I think you mentioned a lot of the resources, but then also having a small. I don't know if there's any challenges, or is that mid-size really kind of perfect in a way, because you have best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm. I think if the situation wasn't set up the way it is here, with having the 25 people, and let's say I was like in Houston where there's like 150, maybe I would feel overwhelmed by the amount of people, 1, and 2, creating like individuality within myself and standing out amongst, X number of people that are there. Because I think at a smaller firm, you get to know people really well. You're there cranking stuff out because, like Andrea said, like somebody has to do this task or that task, whether it's you or somebody else. But I think the delegation is a very big pro, but I think a challenge with being at a larger firm is just establishing who you are and what you bring to the table. So I think, again, like Andrea said, once you become really good at something, don't allow yourself to be pigeonholed because, like, let's say like I'm the best detailer, whatever, but maybe I don't like detailing. And that's why a conversation with you and your PM or PA is very crucial, to allow them to know where your headspace is at. Like, hey, I've been on 5 CA projects, for example, not that this is coming from true experience, but like, let's say you're like, I've been on 5 CA projects. That's all I know. I haven't done any space planning, and based on my NCARB hours, I need X amount of hours. Are you able and willing to be able to provide those resources for me? And I think stating it that way, one, you're establishing your boundaries and saying that you're open to, working on X, Y, and Z, but you also need to meet your minimum requirements for licensure if that's something that you're interested in pursuing. So I think just having those open dialogues is very important, regardless of the challenge, regardless of the firm that you're at. So
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. I think setting yourself apart and to experience different things, especially when you don't really maybe sometimes coming in know what you're good at or what you like without trying things. So that's a great advice. I guess Ellie, do you mind speaking a little bit maybe of the challenges of a large firm that you see, or disadvantage or con, however you want to say it?
Right. I mean, I think the conception is like a large firm, like similar to a large school. It's just easy to get lost. And like Selma said, it's hard to differentiate yourself. I've found that it also is really easy to get involved because there are so many people. There are so many people doing different things. And so similar to, organizations at a large school, you can get involved in some of these things, and that's a way that you can differentiate yourself. So it's kind of using that pigeonholed aspect of a larger firm, but for your benefit or for your interests. So for example, like I'm really interested in the summer intern programs. And so I've been able to actually spearhead that effort now, because I told enough of the people around me that I was interested in it, and they knew enough of the people that were in charge of it, and so it got put together. And so it's kind of using all of those things that could work to your disadvantage in a large firm, but using them to your advantage.
Yeah, that's a great way to turn, I guess, see both sides. Something could be disadvantage, but also an advantage at the same time. So that's great. And then I think you already touched upon a little bit about the resources, but are there other I guess, support for professional growth at Page, or I think, like you mentioned, being able to lead a group or an initiative. I don't know if you want to elaborate, or other professional growth opportunities.
Right, definitely. Kind of as I said, like because there are so many people, everyone is involved in at least one professional group and a non-professional group. So there's a lot of people who are always looking for another player on their softball team or their soccer league. I know we have like a video games club. So there's all those kinds of things, or outside of professional growth, more on the personal growth front. There's all of those things. But on the professional growth front, outside of licensure, we have a lot of small groups in the office that Page allows us to meet during like our work hours. And because Page really values our professional growth, and I think that is something that comes out of a larger firm, they have more of the resources to be able to support that time and commitment, and also to be able to encourage it.
Great. Selma, I think do you want to also elaborate on maybe professional growth? I think some of the ideas you mentioned, maybe mentorship a little bit, kind of that smaller community within a larger other offices, that 25. I don't know, have you developed better relationships on a medium size or a firm of 25 to find and seek mentorship?
I can definitely say that I have. And another good thing that Ellie did point out is having those kind of interpersonal relationships and outside of work commitments with your work people. And that just allows, like, we had a kickball team earlier this year. And I was like, you know what? I literally did not make it to any like athletic team while I was in high school. So why not try it now? You know, like I'm not very sporty, but you know, I'm willing to do it all for the plot. No, I'm just kidding, but it's for the studio culture, and I just knew it was going to be a great team building exercise. And it's about being able to rely on other people outside of your work scope that allows you to see them as people and not just machines. Because I know at the end of the day, things have to get done, but it's in the way that we collaborate with each other that makes everything more enjoyable.
Yeah, that's great. I think finding community, and because we do spend a lot of time at work and with the people that we work with, so those types of opportunities and connections is really great. Sounds like you've all found that in your respective firms. I guess to touch on, something more universal, maybe not small, large, medium, but maybe Sonia, do you have any thoughts on sort of regardless of size, like you said, maybe the size of the firm wasn't at the top of your list, you were more about multidisciplining or collaborating, but what kind of universal work experiences, regardless of firm size, have you experienced?
Yeah, this might be a little controversial,
Go.
but I have I have a golden rule for myself, and I sat with my thoughts for a long time to figure it out. And kind of the thought process behind it is that at the end of the day, the the leadership at your firm is the biggest advocate for their business, and you are the biggest advocate for your career. And so we know architecture is a very selfless field. You do things for other people, you are creating an environment for other people to live in, and you kind of have to be a little selfish. So anytime I honestly do it 2 or 3 times a year. To me, it just doesn't feel like doing it once a year is enough. There are 3 goals, and in those 3 goals, it is what am I providing to the company? How am I helping the company? And how is the company helping me? So the first one being, what do I do? What kind of projects do I want to work on? So specific to architecture, is there a specific project sector that I really want to work on? Is there a specific phase, a specific task, anything specifically skill related that I want to learn? How can I help the firm, get a new project sector, get a new client, get involved in different organizations to help the company get business? I'm helping them, and how is the company providing resources so that I can get better at that skill? So that's kind of the first goal. The second one is the people. What do I do to make the culture at the office better? And how does the office support me as a first generation Latina who is the first person in my family to be in a corporate environment? So for me, that is sustainability based. And at my office, I do what I call a closet swap. So once a quarter, I have everybody bring gently clothes, like professional clothing. And then I turn one of our big conference rooms into a boutique. And, folded clothes hung up, and they shop for free. Everybody, you don't have to donate clothes to shop, and you don't have to shop to donate clothes. So it's become this really fun office environment that is not project related at all. It helps me meet everybody in the office, and it's just fun. It's something fun that you can do in the office. And in turn, how does the company support me navigating spaces that I haven't been in before, or do they support me being in the AIA or going to different committees, joining professional organizations, going to national conferences? Green building conference is one of my favorites. There's always the AIA or NeoCon. So what can I do for the company in terms of what kind of that exchange is? And then the third one is my personal goal. Right now is I'm going into my master's program, and for a while it was, what do I want a master's degree in? How do I see my career going? Where do I want to see myself in 5 years? And can that firm support that? Do you get a stipend to go back to school? Do you get support to study for exams? Do you get mentorship for somebody who's doing the same career path that you're looking into? So I kind of sit 2 or 3 times a year and just write down those 3 things, both me to the company and the company giving it to myself, and then reevaluate if that's the job I like, if that's where I want to stay, and if I need to change anything about that experience.
Yeah, that's great. I think, like you said, it's not about the size, but you're really advocating for yourself and trying to make that happen in any type of any firm, I guess, regardless of size. So does anyone else want to chime in on any universal just experiences in the architecture industry or AEC industry?
Yeah, I'd love to say, I think architecture, the AEC industry is a lot of teamwork. So I would really take advantage of any of the team projects that you're doing in high school or in college. I know sometimes like architecture school, studio culture can be pretty personal and like you're on your same track, but really understand the value in teamwork and learning how to work in a team, because you will do it for the rest of your time. So I would just work in a team as much as you can.
I don't know, Andrea, do you have anything to offer or
Yeah.
Awesome.
I do have something that's kind of crossed my mind as people were talking about, I think, a negative of a small firm, and also a negative of owning your own firm is that you don't have the same level of peers, right? With a small firm, it's really hard to make friends with people you work with because you don't work with that many people and they're usually not, your peer. And then when you are kind of at one of the higher levels in an office, even if you might have peers that are similar age and similar hobbies, I've had times where I'm like, oh, I would love to be their friend, but it feels inappropriate at times because I'm their boss. And so that is one downside that I wish was a little bit different in my path. And in some ways, it kind of forced me to go find some of those relationships through other opportunities. Through ACE, I've been involved for 9 years, and I've met really amazing people throughout the whole architecture, construction, engineering field, and been able to make more of my social friendships that way. You just have to work a little harder at it, I think. And then I would also say at a small firm, it sort of forces you to kind of grow up your career faster. Almost when a family has the older siblings taking care of the younger siblings, in a way, you kind of get thrown into a lot of that quicker. And part of that for me was often that I was the youngest person in the room or at the table or in the meeting, oftentimes the only woman as well. And it really forced me to have to get over whatever kind of fear or anxiety that brought on me, because they will throw you in at the meeting. Like, if you're the only person there that can do it, go sit in on this meeting. And we've kind of all probably been in meetings where we feel a little bit like, oh, I don't know if I should be the one, running the ship, but it sort of forces you to grow up faster in that way, which is both a positive and a negative.
Selma, you look like you wanted to add a little on the universal aspect or anything that we talked about.
Yeah,
so
so
far.
I would definitely say a universal work experience in regardless of the firm size. I feel like there's always a super tight deadlines. There's never a point that you're gonna be like, dang it, like I had so much time for that deadline, like I was literally just twiddling my thumbs. No, like I think we're a perfectionist to a fault, in which we're like, dang it, like I saw that detail wasn't fully flashed and the line work, whatever, it's things that we're gonna get missed, and it's fine if it's gonna get picked up as an RFI later on something. So I would definitely say deadlines. Also not attaching yourself to a certain design, because VE is so real. So you might love it, the client might love it, everyone loves it, and then pricing comes back some type of million over, and it's gonna have to get revised, and it might be your cute fancy tile that you selected or something, I don't know, but you have to be willing and adaptable and not attach yourself to a certain aspect of design, because at the end of the day, it's client driven, and we're a very selfless profession, and it's all for the people and who we serve and the communities. So I would say those are also very universal, and just being adaptable and being a sponge and not taking things to the heart. If somebody has, suggestions on like, hey, I saw that you did this one detail this way. Have you thought about making it this way? Or maybe your family's the way that you do things, or just being always approachable and willing to grow regardless of what the situation might be. But I think one good thing about, both being in small and large projects is just seeing things come to life and the immense feeling that it overcomes you. It's like literally your baby. You quite literally gave birth to it by creating all these conceptual spaces and then picking the finishes, doing the details, consulting with consultants, and then doing the CA work, which is a crazy odyssey in itself, because you can never know too much about CA until you're out in the field and you're like, oh, that's how things are actually built, and I think that might be another thing that we can get into some other time, about just learning how to get your bearings straight in the CA industry, and just being a female, being a Latina, and just knowing where to stand your ground in a lot of these situations, and just being adaptable, being a sponge, and just always being on your toes, ready for whatever.
Yeah, definitely. And because all of that is very universal. I think things you mentioned, we are a service industry, and then a lot of things will change along the way because we have so much input from the owner side, financial constraints, and a lot of projects, even the larger community, like just the users, if you are working on a public building. So we have so many things to juggle, like that is universal, whether you're small or large, just because the nature of the industry. So I know you already started a little bit, Selma, on like advice and consideration, but do you have any thoughts about what it means to find a right fit, or like, not just for people starting out, but through their longevity of their career, like any other advice about this idea of finding, a place that you fit in terms of in the work environment?
I think you always have to be patient. Don't say yes to the first company just because you're in a situation you're like, oh, well, my friends already have internships, they already have this and that lined up, I should be like them. One, do not compare yourself to others. Two, we're all on our own paths. So really try to figure out what you want out of a firm and what the firm can get from you. Just like Sonia said, it's a symbiotic relationship at the end of the day. The moment that the firm is no longer bringing you any benefit, or vice versa, you can look somewhere else. But I think just really figuring out what you want out of your career, what you want to be working. Maybe you want to work with like a legacy firm that has been reputable and just everyone knows it, or maybe you want to work for a smaller firm and be given a ton of opportunities for growth and wearing different hats. So just really figure out what you want and how the company could best serve you. Because if you look at it in any other way, you have to put yourself first, because you're your best advocate, just like Sonia said. And if you're not going to look out for yourself, then who is, So it's okay to also like shift career paths. Maybe if you think, I think I might have been really good at multifamily, but turns out I actually like this other sector, because I think what we're exposed to in school is to have these crazy cool looking designs that are zero, but like unlimited amount of budget and an unlimited amount of schedule. But I think just really focusing in on your fortes, regardless of where you're going to be at, and just really setting up like a pencil in your career. Where do you want to see yourself in 5, 10, 15 years from now? And I think just penciling all those things in, but just knowing that things can change in an instant, and just always being adaptable.
Ellie, I think did you want to add to
Yeah.
some advice?
Yeah, I'd love to add, I think you're absolutely spot on, Selma. I would like to add though that it's also okay to not know. But how you kind of overcome that is by asking the right questions and seeing if that firm can help you figure out where you want to be in the 5 to 10 years. So ask them, what do you provide for a young professional who's figuring out what kind of market sector they'd like to be in? Or what do you provide for all of the other young professionals who are pursuing licensure? Ask them why they chose the firm. Like there are all these kinds of questions that you can ask in interviews that'll help you figure out if that firm will just be able to support you if you're not so sure on where you want to be in a few years.
Right. Yeah, I think this is all, like we said, a journey. I think, and I know Andrea earlier, you said you didn't think about size, you just took opportunities as they come. So a lot of stuff that we learn is an evolution. So I think in that journey of, what is the right fit, or when do you want to ask yourself that question? Maybe it's iterative and you keep asking yourself along the way, 3 to 5, 10 years. Sonia, do you have anything to, any advice on this concept of finding the right fit? Or I know you're delving a lot into exploration. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll start by saying that in the terms of universal pros and cons to firms, I'll say a pro to working in this field, regardless of what firm or what kind of project sector, it is so rewarding to see a physical building at the end of a cycle. You can go inside it, you can climb it, you can see, hey, I detailed that ceiling. This is how it looks like in real life. I drew that mural. To this day, I did a custom tile design for a bathroom at an elementary school, and it is still taped on my desk because it mimics Tetris, and it's still one of my favorite things ever. And it gets better with each project. You're going to know more, you're going to be able to design a bigger part of it. You're going to be able to see more phases of it. It's just such a rewarding experience to be able to grow in your career. And I think people kind of miss that point sometimes because they're too busy trying to figure out what they should be doing or what they could be doing. And then kind of on that subject, you can do whatever you want. There's somebody at my firm who specializes in life safety, somebody at my firm who specializes in building envelope details, another person who loves to do door hardware, and that's how they do. They write specifications for door hardware. You can literally pick any part of the design process and choose to do that. And you can switch at any time because there's such interchangeable skills that one day you can work on specifications, the next you can hop into CA, and then you can go from healthcare to education, because yes, they are different codes and there are different things to consider, but it's the same creative process for all of them. So it's just a really fun experience to, like Ellie said, you don't have to have it figured out, and you can try different things and you'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah, great. That's I think you're right. Like I think by the exploration, I think other people have found their paths. So you can look to people in your office, maybe a few years ahead, or the leadership kind of maybe looking to other people's paths to see, oh, that's appealing to me, or I could see myself being really good at this. But as part of the exploration, I don't think you would know without having experienced anything at any firm. So really just being open-minded, it seems like, too, to see where that journey will take you. But yeah, Andrea, do you have any advice for general or specific to some of the stuff that we've talked about already?
Yeah, I took a couple of notes because I think a lot of the points are really relevant. One thing we haven't talked about is, regardless of size, is kind of the personality and the culture of the firm. And that is one thing I think it's really sort of interesting for me because I probably consult for 40 different architecture firms in Austin. And I get to see that. And some of them I'm like, oh, I never want to work there because they feel stuffy, or it feels like people are constantly like, not necessarily throwing each other under the bus, but a little bit. It feels like if somebody makes an error, they've got to like point fingers or figure it out. And other firms are really like, hey, it happens. We're busy. Let's just work together to find a solution. And so I think that I don't have advice on how to figure that out when you're interviewing. But regardless of the size, I think that that culture is maybe as important or more important. And especially, in this day and age, a lot of people are doing remote or hybrid. And so talking to a lot of different architects as well, if they like the fully remote, do they like the have to always be in the office? Is the hybrid working for you? And so really kind of some more of the logistics side of things that we haven't really talked too much about, that's really starting to evolve quite a bit within the industry. I think, 20 years ago, there wasn't as much variability in the culture within firms, and now you're really starting to see that quite a bit. And then the only other thing I wanted to add to, Ellie talked about how this job and industry is teamwork. It's also really heavy on communication and networking and marketing. No matter what role you have in your firm, you're probably going to do some kind of marketing for them. And you are probably also going to work on trying to get new projects. At some point, you're going to be putting together, schematics and proposals for new work, and you're going to be out there, at some point interviewing for work within your own firm, not just to get the jobs. You're kind of constantly moving forward from that side of things as well. And so just to really take advantage of any opportunities you have in your current pathway through education, to take advantage of learning that, because in my experience, they really didn't teach that in architecture school, or the first early years of my profession. I sort of had to learn it on the go, and it can be really terrifying.
Yeah, and I think thank you for bringing up, what does it mean to find a right fit? It's not just size, definitely the culture and the leadership, or even I don't know if anybody here has experience of maybe the current firm or a previous firm has evolved through time. I know when I joined my firm, we were about 12, now we're close to 40. So we're really in a transition period of scaling up, and that does change the culture a little bit. I don't know if anybody has, or I saw you unmute, Andrea. Did you want to elaborate on that, shifting cultures, or any experiences with that?
Oh, I was just shaking my head in agreement too. Yeah,
Oh.
I mean, any kind of transition, and as somebody that has to make decisions if we do that or not, it's really hard. And then also a lot of times your clients might be choosing the firm, but they might be choosing you. If they've worked with you or the PM, whoever it is on the project, and they have a really good relationship with you, they may want you. They may not want the firm. And so really working through some of those evolutionary transitions within companies, where sometimes, a client says, hey, I was expecting so-and-so, I was expecting this team, but I got this other one. It's not what I wanted. And sometimes you really have to kind of work through some fights around that. And then also, if people leave a firm and go to another one, even though there's contracts in place, sometimes they can take the projects with them at times, because the owner might want them. You build a relationship with the people that you're working with the same way as you do, internally.
Thank you. So I'll have about 20 minutes left, so we want to open up soon to just Q&A from anybody. I think the last question can be brief, is, the whole series of the salon is what I wish I'd known, hindsight 2020, just popping it out to, if you could have one brief thing to say, oh, I wish I knew this. Maybe Sonia, you want to start?
Yeah, short and sweet, you don't have to interview for a job. I think the most useful thing during college is learning that informational interviews exist. You can just email somebody and say, hey, I'm interested in learning more about what you do in your profession. And almost anybody is super glad to grab coffee with you and tell you about their work. You don't always have to work at a company to figure out what they're like.
Selma, I wish I knew this.
I wish I knew how many times I'd be asking questions. I think the way that schooling and everything is set up, you're used to getting like graded on everything, and I feel like this profession, there is no like grading scale, there's nothing. And so you just kind of have to go based off of the other past experience that you have, or you have to like ask like, hey, am I doing this the right way, or how do you suggest doing this, or just always being like asking questions, because there is no right or wrong truly in this industry, I guess. There could be a better option. It's like one of those like A or B or C or all the above. It's always all the above. And there's always things that you can learn. And just knowing that it's okay to not know everything, and being okay to say like, hey, actually, what is an RFP? You know, they're talking about all these projects that we're getting. What is RFP? What is a RFI? What is all these things? What does SIM mean? I don't know, just like the crazy things that you think are understood by everyone, maybe not everyone knows. And if you do know something that maybe there's other people that are fresh out of college, just saying like, hey, can we just clarify what this means for those that might be too scared to ask the question, and just advocating for other people's learning besides yourself. Because I think if you can help clear the way for not only yourself, but others, you're doing everyone a favor.
I do see a question pop up. How does the size of the firm change the relationship between firm and client? How does the dynamic affect the project process depending on the firm's size? I don't know who might want to take this. How does the size of the, or anybody does anybody want to chime in? Andrea?
Yeah, I can. I think it honestly just depends on the firm from my experience, but similar to what Ellie was saying, in a larger firm, you will end up getting, divisions and where you work on these types of projects. So from the client side, they may still see it as, almost like interacting with the 20-person firm, because they only really interact with that side of it. But others may pull in people from kind of all over the place, right? And so it just depends on the firm. But I think from the, a smaller firm size, kind of what I was talking about before, the client may want a relationship with certain people there, right? And so it is important to maintain at least, a couple of key points of contact. And I think that's true amongst all different types of firm sizes. In my experience, it seems like, it's just the size of the project really might pull in more people. But I don't think that it changes the interaction from a day-to-day basis that much with the client.
One thing I can add a little bit is maybe regardless of firm size and affecting client relationships, I think both small and large, I think repeat client business is always a plus. And then I think to develop that connection on the project team, if you're small, you could do that. If you're large, I think maintaining that personal relationship, I think within the small groups or at the leaders of your firm is more impactful than maybe the overall size. But Sonia, did you have something to add?
Yeah, to give an example, now that I'm working kind of in a bigger mid-sized firm, in a typical project, you'll have just a little bit more structure between team members. So you'll have the project manager, who's usually in charge of setting up those meetings and having the direct communication with the client. And then you'll have either a technical lead or project architect for that project who is in charge of the design. So it's just kind of like a trickle effect. They get information from the project manager and then they implement it into the team. And they'll usually have a team of production members under them to help them get all of that done. So just a little bit more structure. If you're starting off kind of as a production team member, you don't typically have direct communication as often as a project manager would with a client. Compared to a small firm, you're usually communicating directly to a principal of the firm because you're such a smaller group. And then that principal will usually let you handle most of the communication with the client. So it does depend on project type, but it's also just kind of more streamlined communication between members and then going through less members in a smaller firm.
Yeah, that's a good point. Does anybody else have questions? You can feel free to unmute if you'd like, or type in the chat.
Hi, I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yes.
Hi, Good evening. First, I just want to comment on or thank you guys for sharing your experience. I've definitely gained a lot of, knowledge from hearing all of you speak on the different instances. And I feel like every time you guys mention something, I like resonate with that and I say, okay, yeah, that's me. No, that's also me. So I really love hearing this, especially as I'm entering into the workforce in my last semester and considering a different firm despite having very minimal experience, especially with a very small firm of like 4 people. And so when I'm, looking into these firms, I definitely am looking into the culture of each firm, and I wanted to ask like, what are some of these like green flags that you would pick up on to know like, okay, this is where I can resonate if I want to, learn a little bit about everything, and I want to be involved in, you know, knowing what the client's needs are, but also following through with the project in the end. And so that kind of attitude, what would be some of the things that I would want to look for? Yes.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And glad that a lot of things talked about today has resonated with you. So I don't know if somebody wants to take that, Ellie. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say it might be a little bit less about what you can look for, but as I said earlier, like just how you can ask. So one of my favorite things is to ask is like, what is the mentorship like at this firm? Am I set up immediately with a mentor, or is there a process of fitting me with a mentor? And a lot of the times, if that's something you're looking for, which it sounds like you are, you should be looking for a firm that has an immediate answer, and they're saying, oh, we already know who we think your mentor would be. We're going to introduce you to them later on the interview, things like that. A lot of the times it's also a pretty telltale sign when people are excited about what they do. So just looking for that. Like if they're smiling, as they're talking about their projects, it just means that they enjoy what they do and they enjoy the people they do it with. So that would be another thing.
I can speak a bit about it too. One of the things I like to ask for is an onboarding buddy. So, not your direct supervisor or who you're working with, but somebody you can ask where the snacks are, or somebody you can ask how the printer works. That's not like a super important question, but that you never know whenever you get to a new office. And then I always ask for a tour of the office, because that will tell you if you hear people laughing. For me, example, when I was taking the tour at this current office, I heard people speaking Spanish just in regular conversation. And that for me was a big factor in picking that company. So just by walking around, you get to see people interacting regularly because they usually don't know you're about to come in. And so that helps a lot in figuring out if you like it there or you think that you would find it interesting.
Yeah, that's a great advice to see what the environment is like firsthand. I think also something that our office does is if people are, interested to hear more other than just who's hiring or HR or whatnot, like definitely you can ask to speak with somebody, one-on-one or in depth. I think we've definitely reached out to people who maybe went to the same school or has some other connection that you can feel more freely to ask questions, not just the person hiring you or the person your first contact would be.
But also say, just to add to that, to consider if it's, fully in person or remote, especially when you're just starting, it's really hard to learn if it's fully remote. If you are physically able, to be there, I think that's a big help. And then also for firms that have a hybrid schedule, I have heard sometimes it can be challenging if everybody's not in the office at the same time for you to, end up interacting with everybody that you need to, because so and so might be there only on Mondays and so on Wednesdays, and you end up not overlapping. So really looking into that from a culture perspective, especially when you're learning and you're just starting your career.
Yeah, that's great. And then I'm glad we are having conversations. I think many years ago, remote or hybrid, wasn't at the forefront, but definitely a lot more options now. So, um, does anyone else have any questions? Or again, feel free to put in the chat or bring on the video or raise your hand. I think I'm not seeing any questions right now, but I just wanted to circle back to, I guess, Andrea and Ellie, because you didn't get to answer my final, what, looking back, what I wish I would have known, just one thing. Andrea, I guess.
Yes. You do not have to be a licensed architect to be successful in our industry or to feel fulfilled in your work.
And Ellie.
I wish I knew that there were so many people to lean on and to ask questions. I think everyone who's listening and is on this panel is already on the right track. We have such a great support network, especially of women in architecture, just to ask all of these questions. So feel free, definitely continue to use me. I'm sure all of the other women on the panel feel the same way. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Know that you can always ask questions and that you have people to lean on, because otherwise it's really scary. And there's a lot that you don't know. So just ask the questions.
Yes, and thank you for the shout out to WiA. I don't know, Ashton, if you want to hop back in and say anything final as we try to wrap up. And I just want to thank everybody on the panel. This has been a great discussion, and hopefully everybody listening in has found something to take away with them.
Yes, you all did fantastic answering questions, and we greatly appreciate everybody that was able to join the call tonight. If you are interested in more, we are doing another panel tomorrow night, which is called the Confidence versus Competence panel, and it's about how do you gain confidence, how do you have competence, and how do they not fight each other, or how do you not fake it till you make it. So another great panel tomorrow. And then we also have an in-person networking opportunity on Thursday for those of you in the Austin area. You can find all the information on that on our LinkedIn, on our AIA page, and also on Instagram. So hope to see some of you there. And if you are interested in more beyond just this week, feel free to sign up for our newsletter, which always, we put everything that we do on there. So everything from panels that are virtual, in-person stuff, and it was said a few times on the panel tonight, network, get a network of people that are in this industry, especially women, because we all want to help each other, because we all have had those additional challenges along the way. So we hope you enjoyed your time, and thank you for joining.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll keep the chat up if people still want to add their contact or ways to reach. But thank you again to everybody here on the panel. This has been really a fun conversation.
Thank you, ladies. Have a nice night.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone. I know we could talk on and on about so many topics, but thank you for sharing your experiences. And, I think this is a topic that anybody can rejoin and still think about, further down, not just entering into profession mid-career and beyond. So.
Yes, and you all did an amazing job. So lots of thank yous came in from the chat at the end. People said it was extremely helpful, great advice. So good work, and thank you.
Thank
guys-
Thank you.
you.
Enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Chin Chin and
Thank you
Ashton, for
all.
putting it together.
Yeah, thank you both. Bye.
Bye.
See you Thursday.
Have a good night.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.